So around a month and a half ago, I took a look at the current state of the graphics card market and came to the conclusion that most other gamers building PCs at the time and really even now would have come to. Looking at the prices of cards from the low end of the scale, starting around the GTX 1050 or the RX 560, and going all the way to the top end of the scale, ending with the Vega 64 on the AMD side of things, or the Nvidia GTX 1080 or 1080 Ti if you really want to spin big on the high end of things. Really across the board, if you were a gamer a month and a half ago, you should have been buying an Nvidia graphics card. Now that largely came as a result of the cryptocurrency mining market, which has been waning a little bit in the past couple of months, but as we know, if it's waning in the last couple of months, it's still going to take a while for those graphics card supplies to build back up in warehouses and stores, so those prices remained elevated, even though the market itself was starting to fall. So we're towards the end of October 2017, we're heading into the holiday season where many of you may be looking for good deals on computer components to either build your own PC or buy a gift for someone that you know and love. So let's take another look at the AMD side of the graphics card market. Starting off with the RX 560, we saw that early on, even a month ago, the 560 hadn't really been that affected by the cryptocurrency mining craze, especially with Ethereum, because many of its cards are the 2GB variant there, and they just don't have a big enough of a VRAM buffer for Ethereum mining for that DAG file. I believe it's a DAG file. So regardless, those cards were largely untouched by cryptocurrency miners, and those prices remain fairly stable, and they still are pretty stable, although they're more expensive than I would like to see them. Typically right now you can expect to pay between $110 to $120, $125, depending on which variant of the 560 you're looking for, but really I don't recommend the 560 because the GTX 1050 is roughly the same cost. You can get them as cheap as, it looks like about $110 right now if you are on Amazon. And again, the GTX 1050 just outperforms the 560 in most games, even if it is a very marginal FPS difference. 1050 typically wins, so I would typically recommend that card over the 560. Moving on up the tiers of the AMD cards, we get to the RX 570, which is still completely overpriced, and I think part of that is just that its supplies were always less than the 580s because the 580 was more of the flagship when it came out, and the 570 was always more of that niche between the low end and the mid-tier cards. It was sort of that low mid-tier card, and I don't think it was ever going to catch on the way the 580 would anyways, or at least I assume those lower supply numbers. The prices remained up towards where you should be looking at a 580 instead, and certainly more expensive than a GTX 1060, which would not be competing with it anyways. The 1060 will beat the 570 in pretty much every title you can come across, and there's no way of recommending the 570 when you're paying as much as you are there. Now when we get to the RX 580s, it gets a little bit more interesting because those prices are significantly down from where they were a month and a half ago. Now it's actually possible to get the RX 580 8GB version, at least on Amazon as of the filming of this, for under the $300 price point, which that card hasn't seen a sub $300 price point in a long time. Now the problem, of course, is that the GTX 1060, the 6GB version, can be had for about $270 also on Amazon as of the filming of this. And again, the GTX 1060, at least the 6GB version, typically in benchmarks that I've seen, slightly outperform the 580 most of the time. Now sometimes the 580 will win depending on what games you play, but if the performance is virtually on par with each other, then take whatever card is cheaper there, and right now the 1060 is still the cheaper card. So to review where we are, you should still take the 1050 over the RX 560. A 1060 3GB card can still be had for cheaper than an RX 570 and will definitely outperform it. And the 1060 6GB card is still the way to go based on the pricing over an RX 580, though that 580 is getting much more competitive as those prices continue to come down. So now we move on to the upper tiers of the AMD lineup. That would be the Vega 56 and the Vega 64, and those cards have one sort of big asterisk beside them. You still have to get the reference design, so it's still a blower design. There are no custom cards that I'm aware of right now out on the market readily available, but at least the Vega 56 and Vega 64 are readily available, so let's take a look at their prices. So as of the filming of this, the RX Vega 56 can be had for about $470, which is a really tough sell because it competes against the GTX 1070, and that card right now can be had for less than $400 on Amazon and is readily available to everyone. In addition, we've seen non-reference cooler designs on the 1070 for a good long while now, meaning your thermals are certainly going to be better on the 1070 than the Vega 56. It's also probably going to draw less power. However, the Vega 56 will compete with performance, but at $70 more than the 1070, it's impossible to recommend the Vega 56 unless you're running a FreeSync monitor already and you really need to stick with an AMD graphics card to take advantage of that adaptive refresh rate. Now, Vega 64 is actually a little bit more interesting than the Vega 56 card right now because you can get it for about $570 on Amazon, and for that same price, you'll see most of the GTX 1080 variants. But again, there is one little caveat. You can actually get a blower style 1080 card, at least there's one from Asus right now, for exactly $500, which saves you $70 over the Vega 64. But as we've seen, Vega 64 can actually beat the 1080 in a lot of titles, so the $570 price point versus other GTX 1080s that do not have that reference design cooler on them, which would be about $570, that's a lot more of a compelling argument. Again, just bear this in mind if you are planning on going the Vega 64 route, and that is that the thermals will not be as good on the Vega 64 as they will be if you get a non-blower style GTX 1080 card. That's just the nature of the beast, and also the 1080 I believe will be quite a bit more power efficient than the Vega 64. So if your power supply is a little bit of a limiting factor in your build, also definitely keep that in mind. So to quickly review the high end of things, definitely take the GTX 1070 over the Vega 56. It's just a much better price to performance ratio right now. And on the top end of things, Vega 64 or GTX 1080, that depends what you value most. If you value thermals and power draw, then the 1080 is the way to go. But if you value pure performance, then maybe the Vega 64 is the way to go. Also, something to keep in mind is that FreeSync monitors are typically cheaper than their G-Sync counterparts. So if you are planning on picking up an adaptive refresh rate monitor with one of those technologies and you're in that price range for the Vega 64 GTX 1080, the Vega 64 may be the way to go just because then you can save some money on the monitor that you're buying. So that's the AMD GPU market update as of the latter half of October 2017. Let me know in the comments down below if you're in the market for an AMD graphics card, and if you are, which one are you gonna pick? Let me know down below. Also, if you like this content, give me a like, share, subscribe, comment, all those things down below help out a lot. You can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. Those are the best places to get a hold of me. And as always, we'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.